In this section, we'll take a look at some of the important breaking changes and deprecations in Angular 9 and how you can resolve them. We're going to take a look at some breaking changes in Angular 9, some APIs and features that are now deprecated, and explore a few new features in Angular 9. In this video, we'll go over some major breaking changes in Angular 9. So Angular 9 now compiles your project or your application with the IB engine by default, and it uses the AOT compiler by default as well. It no longer supports TypeScript 3.4 and 3.5, so it's highly recommended that you upgrade to 3.7. And lastly, the TS library or tslib library, which is required for TypeScript, is now a pure dependency and not a direct dependency. So we'll take a look at that and see what that means in a bit. First, let's look at the Ivy compatibilities here. So again, the default rendering engine is Ivy. That's the new engine right now. And the cool thing is that Ivy applications or the app that you build can still be built using the View Engine libraries. If you use the NGC compiler, you can use that to convert all VE or View Engine libraries to be compatible with Ivy. And we'll do an example of that in a minute. And also Ivy is backwards compatible, which is awesome. That means it's also reversible, meaning that you can set the flag enable Ivy to false in the TS config file, and you can go back and run the View Engine instead. So I'm not sure why you want to do that, but you can do that just by setting the single flag here. So the Ivy Compiler and Runtime now uses AOT for the process, and we've seen this before already, so I'm going to show you here very quickly. The difference between AOT and JIT is the compilation or the generation of pure JavaScript and templates. So JIT will ship a runtime on the browser, and it will compile all your TypeScript and Angular code to JavaScript at runtime, which at that point can also slow down the process of rendering pages. Whereas AOT does all of that behind the scene. Before you deploy, you compile and build the templates already, so when that is served on the browser, nothing needs to be compiled, so it runs much faster, and that's the preferred method here. So TypeScript 3.7, you must have that installed, and I mentioned that 3.4, 3.5 are no longer supported. So the TS library is a pure dependency. That means if you did not create your project using the CLI, then you have to manually install this library, either using yarn or npm, as you see here. All right, so let's just take a quick look at how ngcc works and how you can revert back to using View Engine. All right, so here back in the IDE, I'm going to go into Angular 9, run the app. Well, we're just going to take a look in the code here. So TypeScript, if you go to the ts config file here, open that up, and you see that we did this earlier in the very bottom where it has property called Angular Compiler Options. You can add in here a property just like in Angular 8 that calls enable Ivy. You could set that to true or false. Right now it's set to true by default, and you don't need to set it. It's already set by default anyway in the configuration. But you can force it to be false or true. So for example, I'm going to set it to false for now and run the code, for example. Let's save that. And so in my engine down here, if you remember how you can compile this to, or you can build this, you can see the difference in the code. So for example, if I go in ngb for build, production, so I'm going to go and hit enter, and we'll see that in the distribution or the dist folder, there should be all the code or the compiled code in there. Remember, we're using Angular 9, and now Ivy is enabled. I mean, it's set to false. So I'm expecting to see View Engine type of code, right? It's no longer running Ivy at this point when you compile your code. Okay, so let's go and take a look inside the dist folder. Okay, so let's see here. I don't have any apps in here, so actually, this is not what I wanted to show you. I didn't mean to build it. I meant like to compile. Right, so let's try again. It should be the compilation. So ng in the nodes folder, the bin, and then ngc. This is what I want to show you. We're going to compile the code, and we'll see a different folder out in the dist folder called out in the source code. So let's go here into the add modules, and let's just add the home component here, just so you can see the compilation process here. Right, save that and do it one more time. Okay, I'm going to close this now. Okay, so if you look in the dist folder, there should be an out folder right here, out TypeScript. And you see in the source folder here, the files that are now rendered will compile. So you can see that now it's back to the View Engine format, right? You have the ng factory which you don't see in the Ivy. So everything's like back to View Engine here again. So again, you can revert back to View Engine if you want. I don't see why you want to do that. You can do that simply just by setting the flag to true or false here. So since we have it here, I want to just set it to true, or just remove it all together so it's Ivy by default. Okay? Right, so the next thing is the ngCC. That is for if you want to compile or convert all your libraries that are used inside your app, and if they're not compatible with Ivy, you can force it to be converted to be compatible with Ivy by default. So for example, if you go to the in your app and the nodes folder, when you run this for the very first time from Angular 9, you see that in the Angular folder, you have some libraries. Now all of these are need in your app, but then they're not needed directly by Angular, right? It's from other libraries that needs them. That's why they're probably not going to be converted. But the main libraries that you need for your app, Angular need, will be affected. So for example, mostly in your like the animations, for example, and the common in here, even though it ships with Angular 9, some of these are still like View Engine compatible. And you see that some of these already converted to Ivy. You see there's a backup file here. That means when you run it for the first time, you build it because this is needed, so it will convert that to Ivy already. And you see a Ivy_-ngc, the backup file. That means this is the old V format. This is the Ivy compatible format. And you can compare the two if you just select both of those and compare. And it will tell you what's changed and what's not changed. So you can see here that the one on the left is the Ivy. One on the right is the backup, which is the non-Ivy one, which is the VE, right? So you can see, go down and compare these red lines that tell you what they are. And mostly just they have these static properties here for most of these here. So this has been converted to Ivy already. Okay, so we'll do something similar here, except we'll run the ngCC compiler to change all the required libraries to Ivy compatible. Okay, so to do that, it's very simple. So notice again, I just want to show you first. We've seen the comment already. So inside here, like in the ESM5 and O5 here, there's nothing in here. Well, you still have some files in here that need to be converted. And maybe like in the animations, for example, you have the metadata JSON file here. So normally when you convert to the Angular Ivy, you're not going to need this metadata file anymore. So chances are these either will be deleted or something. We'll take a look. But notice you don't see any other ngCC extension like you saw here, right? The Ivy ngCC backup here inside any of these. So let's go ahead and run that right now in the command terminal. And the format or the location is very into the same place as this. You just have to type ngCC instead of ngC. Okay, so I'm just going to hit the up arrow and then type ngCC and hit enter. And it's going to find your libraries and convert them to Ivy compatible. If there are any. If there are none, then it will just return nothing. But let's see what it finds. Expand a little bit larger. You can see there's a lot of these libraries are still in the View Engine format. It's not going to do that until maybe like a version or two in the future that all libraries should be Ivy compatible. So Ivy is still running the V Engine libraries, you can see. Okay, so you can see a host of libraries that are needed by Ivy and then now they're converted. Now if you go to any one of these locations here, you can see the changes. Okay, so for example, if we go to animation here, and let me just refresh this to see the changes. Okay, the metadata is still here, so that's fine. So you can see that the declaration files are now converted. Not much here, as you can see, but you can certainly compare the two. Again, this is the new one, this is the old one. Just right click and then compare, select it. You see again any changes. This one has no changes, not much here, so that's just okay. If you go into a different bundle like the browsers, for example, you can try the browser here and see how much have changed. So again, just a few tiny changes here. It has one import here. And if you scroll over here, you see what it says. This Angular core, and then down here is another one. So again, the static properties here are added to all the components module. So that is how you would compile and change all your libraries to be Ivy compatible.